But let's be honest, if you're being praised instead of compensated, that's not appreciation. That's cost control. And it works because most people aren't trying to be greedy. They're trying to be safe, and they're trying to be appreciated and wanted. This is Hustle Rebels, a podcast for people who know how to grind, but are starting to question the cost. I'm Renee, and here we talk about success, burnout, and nervous system regulation without glorifying exhaustion or sacrificing your health, relationships, or your sense of self, and without pretending ambition is the problem. Let's get into it. If you've ever been praised instead of paid, if you've ever been asked to just help out or show what you can do, if you've ever given an idea that mysteriously showed up later without your name on it, then this episode is for you. And by the end, you're not going to be fired up and angry. Instead, you'll have 3 grounded ways to start protecting your time, your ideas, and your energy without quitting your job, burning bridges, or becoming cynical. We have been taught that overgiving is professionalism, that exhaustion is dedication, that access to opportunity is payment enough. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have been told as a musician that the payment was exposure. To who? But here's the uncomfortable question that no one asks. Who actually profits from your hustle? Because if the answer isn't wholeheartedly you, then you've got some questions that need answers. Welcome back to Hustle Rebels. Last episode, we talked about conditioning, how urgency feels safe and rest feels a little risky, and the 9-to-5 really gets normalized without questions. Today we're zooming out because if your nervous system equates overworking with your worth, you're not just tired, you're easy to exploit. And no, this isn't an anti-work rant. It's a reality check about how corporations and systems quietly normalize the extraction of your time, ideas, and talent, often with your consent. If this conversation hits, just pause for 2 seconds and subscribe. This podcast is for people who feel like the grind stopped working, but the system just keeps demanding more. So here's how this usually shows up. Praise replaces pay. Opportunity replaces compensation. Urgency replaces boundaries. And collaboration blurs ownership. You're told things like, this will look great on your resume. We're all pitching in. This is just how it works. You're the best one for the job. I promise I'll make it worth it. But let's be honest, if you're being praised instead of compensated, that's not appreciation. That's cost control. And it works because most people aren't trying to be greedy. They're trying to be safe, and they're trying to be appreciated and wanted. Here's story number 1. Let's call it the unpaid test. Someone I connected with on LinkedIn, Homyar, shared an experience that kind of stopped me in my tracks. They applied for a graphic design role at a nonprofit, which turns out to be one of the wealthiest nonprofits in the country. Multiple interview rounds, board members were involved. Then came the final assignment. Real work, real deliverables, many hours of unpaid labor. Unfortunately, they didn't get the job. And while the rejection wasn't the issue, the realization was. A full month of emotional energy and unpaid effort given to an organization that had the means to pay. And to be clear, I don't think every candidate assignment needs to be paid. That's not the point. The question is, why is the assignment so demanding in the first place? If the goal is to assess skill, you should already be able to see that through someone's portfolio, their past work, and how they talk about their process. So when an organization asks for something that looks like real deliverables, multi-page layouts, full strategies, polished execution, you have to ask what's actually being tested. Is it talent or compliance? Is the goal to see if someone can do the work, or is it to see if they'll do it without questioning the cost? Because those are two very different things. One measures capability. The other one measures how much someone is willing to self-abandon in order to be chosen. The lesson wasn't don't try. It was this. Boundaries aren't about holding back. They're about valuing your time before someone else decides what it's worth. So if the business isn't testing talent or compliance, it leaves the third option, which is free content, which leads to the second story, the stolen strategy. Here's another story that was shared by Homyar, and it hit even harder. A candidate was asked to submit a full marketing strategy, positioning, campaigns, execution logic. With the follow-up interview, they walked leadership through their entire plan. They were also rejected. 2 weeks later, the company ended up launching a campaign built directly from that strategy. It was the same structure, same tone, same offer. But it failed. Why, you might ask? Because they copied the idea, but not the understanding behind it. And this is the part that no one talks about. As Homyar had shared, when companies extract ideas without context, they don't just steal creativity, they also inherit risk. Execution without understanding rarely succeeds. There's one more layer to this conversation that we don't talk about nearly enough. It's not just corporations. I've seen the same pattern play out in churches, and sometimes that hits even deeper. When exploitation happens at work, at least it's framed as business. But when it happens in the name of God, that messes with your nervous system on a whole different level, like an identity level. You're told it's service. You're told it's sacrifice. You're told that it's humility, obedience, and calling. And slowly your talent, your time, and your energy, sometimes even time with your family, gets extracted under spiritual language. You're not just disappointing a boss if you say no. You're disappointing God or leadership or the mission. And that's a powerful lever. I've watched people, myself included, give hundreds of unpaid hours, creative work, leadership, talent, emotional labor, skill sets that would cost thousands in any other setting. And when boundaries get introduced, suddenly it's framed as a lack of faith or selfishness or not being called anymore. That's not spiritual leadership. That's authority without accountability. And here's the part that really matters. Exploitation doesn't stop being exploitation just because it's baptized. If a system benefits from your self-abandonment, it will always find a moral reason to justify it. Corporations call it loyalty, but churches call it sacrifice or donations. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It just knows you're depleted. This is where people get confused and think that they're broken. They're not. You're not. You're responding exactly how a conditioned system trained them to respond. And if you've ever felt guilt for wanting rest, pay, credit, or boundaries, especially in a spiritual space, that is not conviction. It's not guilt. It's not shame. That is conditioning. Whether it's corporate culture or church culture, the pattern is the same. Extraction disguised as virtue. And the cost is almost always paid by the most committed people in the room. And here's what makes this possible. People don't overgive because they're naive. They overgive because their nervous system is wired for approval, safety, and belonging. And they're just good-natured people being taken advantage of. Job searches, people in authority, or using the fear or guilt of God put people in threat states. Power imbalances trigger compliance. Compliance looks like over-delivering. A dysregulated nervous system will give away assets just to feel secure. And that's not a character flaw, it's biology. So if this is landing or resonating in some way, just take a deep breath and subscribe. Because this podcast isn't about doing less, it's about helping you achieve sustainable success without burning your entire life to the ground. It's not about quitting your job. It's not about storming out of your church. And it's definitely not about becoming a cold-hearted, guarded, or cynical bitch, right? This is learning how to reclaim your energy without self-destructing in the process. Because here's the truth. Most people don't need a dramatic exit. They need a regulated nervous system and clearer agreements. So let's talk about what actually helps. First, number one, your ideas are not favors. If something creates value, solves problems, or moves a system forward, that is an asset, and assets deserve protection. That doesn't mean hoarding your creativity. It means recognizing that inspiration is not free just because it came easily to you, because it didn't come easily to someone else. That means they should have to pay for it, right? If someone wants your thinking, your strategy, or your vision, there should be clarity around ownership, credit, or compensation, not later, upfront. Second, clarity before contribution. Before you give your time, your energy, or your ideas, ask one simple question. What happens if this works? If the answer is vague, if the reward is exposure, gratitude, or spiritual brownie points, just take a pause. Clear containers protect relationships. Unclear ones, they're a breeding ground for resentment. Boundaries don't ruin opportunities, trust me. They do not ruin opportunities. They only reveal whether the opportunity was real to begin with. Third, and this one is big, regulation before generosity. If you're offering from anxiety or fear, from a need to be liked, chosen, approved of, or spiritual validation, that is not generosity. It is not of a giving spirit. That is survival. A dysregulated nervous system gives too much, too fast, in order to feel safe and secure. And then they wonder why it's resentful later. Generosity that costs your health, your family, or your sense of self is not noble. It's unsustainable. You don't need to harden your heart. You don't need to become guarded or even transactional. Everything doesn't need to be a transaction. You just need to regulate. You don't even need to get credit for everything. When your nervous system feels safe and secure, you can give on purpose, not out of fear and not out of guilt. You can say yes without self-abandoning. You can say no without spiraling. And you can contribute without disappearing in the process. It's not about doing less or forcing transactions. It's about doing what's aligned. And finally letting go of the belief that your worth is somehow proven by how much you're willing to sacrifice. So before we move on, I want you to try something just once. It's something that you can do without anyone even noticing it. But it can do wonders to help regulate your system when you're under pressure. Wherever you are, I want you to feel something solid supporting you. The chair, the floor, perhaps the seat beneath you. I want you to take one normal breath in. Don't change it. And I want you to think of a recent moment where you agreed to something and then immediately felt tension. Maybe it was a tight chest, a shallow breath, a clenched jaw, or tension in your shoulders. I just want you to notice where your body reacted. And I want you to ask yourself one question. If I didn't need approval, would this still be a yes? You're not deciding anything right now. You're just noticing. And then take one inhale and then a slow exhale. That pause, that moment, before you explain or justify or overgive, that's regulation. And that's where better decisions come from. And what you just did right there, it's not calm or peace necessarily. It's information. That reaction, that tension, that pull toward approval, it's not random. And it's not just something that you're born with. It's learned. It's conditioning. It's an identity that you have been running on autopilot. Most people try to fix that with boundaries or more discipline, but more discipline and boundaries don't stick if the identity underneath them hasn't changed. And that's where the real work is, uncovering what the identity underneath that autopilot is. That's why I created my new course called Burn the Blueprint for people who are done running on the conditioning they never consented to. It's a 4-week self-paced identity reset. It's not some woo-woo mindset course, not a nervous system gimmick, but it helps you identify the beliefs, roles, and expectations that had trained you to overwork, overgive, and self-abandon, and then rebuild from the inside out. The link is going to be in the show notes. You don't need another productivity hack. You need a new operating system. In the upcoming episodes, I'm going to be bringing on some guests. People willing to talk honestly about hustle culture, burnout, identity, and what it costs to keep performing. If that's you, I'd love for you to reach out. If you want to be a supporter of Hustle Rebels podcast, there's going to be a link in the show notes as well. If this conversation resonated, share it with someone who's been praised into exhaustion. Subscribe, stay tuned, and remember, you don't need to stop caring. You just need to stop bleeding for people who don't give a shit about you. See you next week.